Welcome to Best Practices Weekly for Primary Teachers. Today we'll look together at an article called Visual Representations in Second Graders Information Book Compositions. We'll look closely at the article, we'll pick out what the best practices are for primary classrooms, and we'll talk about what that looks like in kindergarten, first, and second grade classrooms. We'll make some all-important Common Core connections and even talk about some kid-friendly I can statements before we leave. Let's get started. This article was written by 3 university professors for the reading teacher, and it focused in on how many teachers are turning to science trade books or mentor texts or informational picture books to teach science content instead of textbooks. And then it focused in on a second grade classroom where they examined the direct instruction of visual representations, and then they followed the students' culminating project in their own creation of science informational text. The authors discussed how trade books and mentor texts are really good alternatives to science textbooks because they're packed with visual and graphic displays that help kids connect to the content, but that those same visual and graphic displays also add a new layer of meaning and complexity to the text that children have to be able to comprehend and compose meaning from. So this research took place in a second grade classroom during a 3-week study on weather. They used 5 mentor texts for direct instruction of the features of nonfiction text, and then they asked the students to create an informational text on weather as a culminating project. Let's talk about the specific best practices that we can pull out of this research. The first thing that the teacher made sure to do was to just actually notice the visuals, to point them out, to draw attention to different aspects of the visuals. For example, speech bubbles, and the class talked about why is that speech bubble there? What does the speech bubble tell us? This also allowed the teacher to incorporate some really specific content vocabulary. Then the teacher made sure to identify the visuals and give a name and a purpose to each of the features of the text, like naming diagrams, labels, and captions, and the teacher used a think aloud model to demonstrate this for the kids, and then she also gave the students a chance to notice and name the visuals that they saw within the text. The teacher then made sure to talk about what the visuals convey. Why is that there? What do we learn from that? How can we connect that to the text? For example, in a picture of how air pressure works, they talked about what the arrows were, what do the arrows show, and what did we learn from the arrows within the text. At the end of this unit, the teacher asked the students to write an informational book about weather as kind of a culminating project. During one 45-minute block, they were asked to use their mentor text as a guide, includes words, pictures, drawings, all of the visual formats they had learned about, and to try to make it as much like a real book as possible. When the authors looked closely at the student work samples, they found that they really had used everything that they had been taught about visual representations and informational text, including pictures, labels, captions, even arrows to make connections and diagrams, and that they had really modeled their writing after the mentor text that had been read aloud. So what does this mean for our classrooms, and how can we take this back to our little friends? Well, it means that when we're reading books aloud, especially in science and content areas, we need to make sure that we're doing it with a specific intent to teach those features of nonfiction text. A great way to do this would be a think aloud, and to talk about how good readers connect visuals to the words in the text to help make meaning. It might also be neat to keep an anchor chart throughout the year where you add different features of nonfiction text as you come across them in books. And then we need to make sure that we're asking children to actually produce text that has those visuals within it. These best practices definitely align to Common Core, especially in the first shift, which is 50% informational text within the classroom. And as we shift to integrate literacy in the content areas, we're going to see more and more science trade books and mentor text used to teach science and social studies as opposed to text straight out of a textbook. And then look at all of the reading informational text standards that this strategy would help cover for kindergarten and first grade and second grade, including being able to read and comprehend informational text and make sense of what the text says and how the visuals and the features of nonfiction text support what the author is trying to say. To sum it up, here are some kid-friendly I can statements that can help your students connect with the concepts that you're trying to teach them. I can notice and identify visuals in informational text. I can explain how visuals and informational text add meaning to the book. I can connect the words in a text to the visuals in a text, and I can write informational text and include visuals that add meaning. Of course, direct instruction of important words like identify, visuals, informational text would be really important to make sure that your students don't just know the I can statement, but understand the end expectation and what mastery looks like of those I can statements. We hope you'll take these strategies back to your classroom. Try them out and visit us at bestpracticesweekly.com or find us on Facebook at Best Practices Weekly and leave us a comment to let us know how these best practices went in your classroom. Thanks for joining us.